Thanks, Malcolm. Thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. So your journey started in Hemel, and you've skied, or sorry, snowboarded in like Canada, New Zealand, and now you live in Alpe d'Huez. Is that right?
Yeah, that's
Is there
right.
any moment that kind of when you started your career that you thought, oh yeah, this is for me. This is what I'm about.
I mean, at first, my motivations were just to sort of get away from home and do a ski season. Being an instructor became like an easy way to kind of maybe do that at the beginning. And then along that journey, I got more interested in the teaching or the coaching side of things. And I mean, actually, just quickly to cut to you, how would you define coaching versus teaching? Do you see them as interchangeable or?
Yeah, I think so. Like I talk about it as like coaching on this podcast because I think that's more of a broad term for more people. But yeah, I see it as interchangeable. I think like in instructing, teaching, coaching, like we talk about right within Basie, it's like it's student centered. So I think a lot of the coaches I talk to, it's a similar sort of philosophy, like about the athlete or the person that you're interacting with. I don't know.
Yeah.
I see them as a bit interchangeable. I'm sure if I looked in the dictionary, it'd be different. But what do you think?
But yeah, just the way I was retelling that story there, I was early on, it was all about instructing. It was much more sort of a job that I did. And when you say coaching, it sounds more serious. I think coaching to
Mm.
me generally is a bit more long term. You might do like a 2 hour lesson and you instruct someone. As soon as you start coaching, I tend to think of more sort of long term goals rather than a quick fix. No, I was just curious to hear your take on it. And I guess to sort of go back to your question. So yeah, at the beginning, really, it was just like, oh man, I'm gonna try this and do ski seasons. But then I guess it was like in New Zealand. So when I started working down there quite early on as an instructor, when I had just my level two, you need something, I think, to give you a motivation to really want something. I think that applies to like a lot of stuff in life. If you really want to do something, you need something to kick you up the butt. And this sounds kind of silly, but when I was in New Zealand, they used to give the best instructor, the best teacher every year would get a heli-ski trip.
Oh
And
wow.
I'd done a few seasons and like really wanted to go heli-skiing. It was obviously something I couldn't afford at all. And that's your like Willy Wonka chocolate factory golden ticket thing going on a heli ski trip,
Mm.
especially when you're relatively new to skiing and snowboarding. That's your dream trip. And I'd done a few seasons in New Zealand, but then one year I was like, I'm going to win this trip. I'm going to be like the most professional instructor because the
Mm.
first few seasons I was just like a bit of a dirtbag and stereotypical instructor, getting smashed every night and turning up to work
Yeah,
hungover and not really taking it seriously.
yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to start thinking about this as more of a job, more of a career. And it took something stupid like trying to win a heli ski to be the motivation for me to take things more seriously. So that season, I
Mm.
was so much more professional and I didn't win it. They, what I realized is the directors of the ski school have no idea what you're doing if you're turning up hungover.
Yeah.
They send you off out of your lessons and then you come back. They got no idea. But that was the kind of motivation for me. And that's when I shifted and like, being okay, this is just something I do to facilitate me traveling and getting a little bit of money to something I'm going to try and make a career out of.
Oh, awesome. So you said there like an interesting point. So you were level two at the time, and then so obviously you're a trainer in level four within the British system. So when you're training yourself, and you said like they don't know how we teach, I've often thought that we're doing ski school training at the moment, and it's nice seeing other people teach because you can never be in someone's lesson. So you see
Yeah.
people on the hill all the time and that sort of thing. So when you worked your way through the system, what are some things that did you reflect on your own lessons, or did you think about how other people were teaching, or did you hear other people teaching, or like how did you manage working your way through the system and training and that sort of thing?
So, I mean, I guess that season where I took myself a bit more seriously also coincided with me working my way through Daisy a bit more. I got my level
Mm.
two and I stayed on that for a little while. And as I was taking the job more seriously, I was also progressing through the levels. But I think New Zealand for me was like a real melting pot of ideas and everything. You know, you've got all these instructors there from all around the world. And because there's not that many places you can teach over the summer season, the guys that are going to, places like Australia, New Zealand, and South America are going there because they love it and they really want to do it. And so I'm surrounded by a French guy, Swiss guy, Austrian guy, American guy, Canadian guy. And it's kind of ridiculous in the lunchroom, like everyone's arguing about the best way to do a turn and this kind of stuff. And if you can step back from thinking like, oh, I do it this way, this is the best way, then you can get so much stuff from all these other people that are all really knowledgeable, and they might have been taught in slightly different ways and might explain it in slightly different ways, but really we're all doing the same thing. We've all got the same goal. So it was being there that really kind of opened me up to being more open and trying to learn as much from other people as possible. Because when I finished my level 2, at that point, I thought I knew everything. I was the best. And it took me like a while to kind of realize that actually, like, I really didn't know anything, and there was so much more for me to learn. And one of the shifts with that, which is less about teaching now, more about riding, was just how I viewed someone's riding. I always used to really look at things like posture, how their upper body looked, and that must look a certain way because I've been taught to stand in this certain way. And I had this gradual shift, not look at that so much anymore, but look at just what the board is doing and forget about who's on top of it or what system they've come through or if they're an instructor or not. But it's pretty easy to tell if someone's doing something awesome with their snowboard. And then if you see that, then you can try and approach that person and try and learn what they know and take things from that, and just don't have the closed mindset, basically. Be really open to learning new things and take what you can from other people. And if you can put yourself in a position to be surrounded by people like that, like I was lucky to be able to do in New Zealand, then you just got to try and take as much from that as you can.
Yeah, I had exactly the same situation in Australia. Yeah, you just full of a locker room with all sorts of certed people from all sorts of countries, and it's great. Yeah, not arguments as such, but chats and discussions definitely help solidify technique things in your head, right? Like you think a certain way until you see something that doesn't fit what you think. It's like, well, I've seen it, so I've got to change something. I've got to change how I think.
And you can get yourself in this. I mean, it's a crazy little bubble you can be in when you're surrounded with people like that, because what we do is ridiculous. We're just sliding down a mountain on a plank of wood, or 2 planks of wood in your case.
Yeah.
But I mean, everything kind of sounds stupid if you reduce it like that.
Yeah.
Like hitting a ball into a hole with a stick for golf, for instance.
Yeah.
But there's something so rewarding on honing in on a specific skill and engaging on that pursuit of perfection, basically. And that pursuit takes time and effort. So you have to kind of pick your activity wisely. And at this point, I'm like all in on snowboarding, and we've all got limited time and you can't perfect everything. And I think that's why clients as well, and whether it's like athletes or just someone that's booking a lesson, they can all become so fanatical about becoming better at mastering something because they're also at that point, like, I'm all in on this. And whether that is skiing, snowboarding, or golf, I think it's our job to kind of nurture that drive, that striving for perfection, and guide that person, client, athlete, or whatever towards that goal in the most effective way possible. But at the same time, realizing that we are just sliding around on planks of wood.
Yeah, absolutely. So funnily enough, I think with the YouTube now, obviously you have a pretty prolific YouTube channel, so you get a lot of people contacting you on that. And I find that the people that get in touch with me on that very much have that mindset that they've found me because they've searched online for more, basically, like more technique videos and things like that. So when you're making your videos, you just said then about board performance and things like that, because the question I always think of whenever I watch anything online, like not just snowboarding or skiing or anything, golf, whatever, do you specifically think about being broad, or do you think about being super specific and hope it finds the right person? Or do you do a mix, or what goes through your head when you're developing your videos?
It's a bit of a mix. So like when I started making videos and things, when you haven't done a video, it's like easy at the beginning, like how to stand on a snowboard, how to turn, things like that. And then once
Mm,
you've made a few videos and you've covered most of those bases, and you're learning all the time when you're making videos, yeah, I try to get my videos to be quite broad because you don't want to say this video is specifically for an advanced rider because then you cutting interest for anyone who's not that. So you want the videos to be broad, but at the same time, YouTube definitely indulges this kind of overthinking. And I think this is a bit more unique to skiing and snowboarding because it's seasonal and most people, it's something they only do 1 week of a year. They want to get as much in as possible before that has even started and maximize their off snow time. So there is definitely, I think, like online an appetite for gleaning as much information as possible before you get out there. And that does lead me sometimes to have clients who are very over analytical and will happily talk about one phase of a turn for an hour without doing any riding. And I have to sometimes push people and be like, look, he can talk about this all day, but you're out here and you just need to do this thing. We need to get out there and do it. That's like the best way that you're going to progress as well.
yeah. I find that as well with when we do the courses. I say that to people all the time. You know, like you can read the manual at home. Like
Yeah,
when we're on the hill, it's good to go skiing. We're not just going
yeah,
to
for
stand
sure.
and discuss the manual.
You know,
Um,
I think that's something that can happen in, in like these basic courses as well. When you're doing your level
mm,
ones, twos, threes, etc., you've got a lot of people that like to talk about skiing there.
mm,
And yeah, I've been in some of these courses and you're stood on the side of the hill for an hour talking about something. And yeah, you've got to maximize your time when you're on the snow at doing on snow stuff as well. So there's a big difference between YouTube and real life. But one thing that kind of carries between them and one sort of lesson I've taken from both of them is just trying to get the information over in the most concise and efficient way as possible. And particularly now, as I do more stuff on Instagram as well, it's very easy for me to go out with a camera and talk for 10 minutes about making turns in a YouTube video. But if I'm trying to condense all that information into 90 seconds for Instagram, really gets you thinking, how can I get to the point in the most effective, concise way possible? And it's a good tool actually for explaining things on that medium, because then when you teach in real life, you can almost recite something you've said on a post or whatever, and
mm.
you can get the information straight to the client super fast. So I would kind of recommend just putting stuff out there as a tool, as a way to practice being more
Mm.
concise with your information as well.
Yeah, I've definitely found that the last couple of years. I think my teaching's become like I'm one of those people that love talking about skiing. But like we said, like I know it's best for the
Yeah.
person I'm with to actually ski. But yeah, I'm definitely more concise now with the teaching. Yeah, I'd second that. I'd highly recommend people record themselves, and it's tough. Like you edit all your own stuff, right? Like how did you
Yeah.
find that out first? Like watching yourself, and was that an easy process, or did it take time to?
Yeah, it's really weird. And if anyone's trying to get into this as well, it's easy to be a perfectionist and think your first video is going to be perfect. And it's not at all, but you just got to do it. A bit like being out there on the hill and talking about it. Just do it and say once you've made 10 videos, you will be so much better than that first one you put out. And you will learn so much about yourself and seeing yourself talk. And yeah, there's bits of it you're going to hate, but you'll get over that quickly. And it will make you a better instructor, teacher, presenter, everything.
When you were saying then about being concise, so when you have a group and and there's like big splits and things of that nature, so like in terms of skill ability, like is there something you found that helps with that? Because it's all,
I mean,
so like in private, it's fine, you can be kind of
yeah,
concise
yeah.
to that person, but when it's on a larger scale, how do you
Yeah, I
find?
do. I run a lot more camps now, so I have a lot more splits as well. One thing I'm quite big on now, like across the board, is really trying to set up tasks and drills, whatever, in terms of like a real tangible outcome that everybody can understand. And it's not going to be something that's difficult to quantify. Like, for instance, saying, trying to get someone to hold a certain position and have a certain percentage of weight on one foot versus the other. That's not something that they're really going to know exactly if they're doing it. But if you can just say something like, I want to see your line, it's a perfect thin line across the slope. That's something so easy that everyone can relate to and see and work towards. So even if you have splits in groups, you can often create a common goal. And the thing that's so easy with skiing and snowboarding is we do it in this place that's incredibly well set up to make tasks slightly easier or more difficult. You know, if one person's getting it easily, you can make them come in with more speed, for instance. You know, you can take it to a steeper slope, and we're in this perfect learning environment where you can repeat tasks so easily, but at the same time throw in distractions and difficulties. And it's by doing all those things that you can enable people to actually learn and acquire motor skills really quickly. It's actually quite similar to how you learn to drive. So I've gone a little bit off topic here, but this was something I was looking at for a while. You know, if you think about driving, it's something we all do. You know, if you drive, something we all do so naturally, you don't have to think about it. You can have the radio on, hold a conversation. But when you first started learning, it was so difficult. You've got all these movements that you're trying to do, and all this other stuff going on outside of your car window as well that's distracting you. But the movements aren't that complex, and it's kind of the same within skiing and snowboarding. There's a few movements we're making, and you know, we're not doing anything that crazy. But because we practice this in like an ever-changing environment, no two turns will ever be the same. The snow will be slightly different, the light's different. You know, and it's this repeating of tasks like you do in driving, pushing the pedal, moving the wheel, but constantly slightly changing that allows you to really acquire a skill really fast. So it's making use of that as well, and you know, set up tasks, but don't keep anything too static. Try and keep everything changing all the time, and that just allows you to deal with splits better.
I'm with you with the common goal. I think it's clever as well, because then you can get people of different abilities even working together. I find I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and they talk about, you know, actually physically splitting people into pairs that are of the same ability. But actually, if you create a common goal, it doesn't matter. They can arguably work together. You know, like we said about in the locker rooms in Australia and New Zealand, you got people of all different qualifications chatting about the same thing, right? So it's like you can learn things from different people at different levels. So with that one though, like, I know you enjoy the technical side of snowboarding as well, but then also the joy of snowboarding. So how do you find that balance for say those guests or clients that come and they may say to you, you know, I want a really like technical session, and I know I've had the same in the past, but then actually when you do some fun stuff, you really see them light up.
Yeah.
So how do you find that balance?
I mean, I think like the main thing you have to do with anyone or any group is really try and figure out their goals straight away. There's no point anyone turning up and you've got a plan and that doesn't align with their goals. You know, and some people, they do enjoy that technical side of things. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like you think that's what they want. That's what they've told you they want to do. And they seem to really enjoy talking about the technical side of things. And then you suddenly teach them how to do a 180 and they're like more stoked they've been all day by trying to master their turns. I guess I try to show how, you know, say we're doing like real technical short turns, just using one side of a piece, and we keep going through that piece. And, you know, we're working on a specific thing. I would always, within the session, like to show how that can be used in another fun or like more creative way. Like, cool, so those short turns we've got, now we're going to like go for an explore through this forest and try and ride through these trees. And they're like, well, I can't do that. It's never done that before. And, you know, show them how these skills can translate to something else would be a good way to try and kind of get them out of this like real focused, only riding one slope, one type of turn kind of mindset, basically.
With that then, what about when people are first getting into snowboarding, like say they've watched a few of your videos, something like that? What's something that could help people that first wanted to get into the sport?
Well, one thing that I just thought about when you were asking that question was, I think a lot about how people are getting into it, and a lot of people do get in through things like Instagram and YouTube, and those mediums are kind of guilty of trying to offer these quick fixes a lot of the time, and you'll see videos like, do this to suddenly be able to turn and ride a black run or whatever, maybe that's an exaggeration, but and I think one of the problems is a lot of people go out and they might have watched a clip or something, and some of these quick fixes and things like that can be kind of bad advice. Like, I was talking to a guy the other day who was telling me like how he had loads of success teaching someone to make a turn by using their upper body to basically to point their arm down the hill. And I'm not saying it didn't work for whoever he was teaching, and I can see how it can work, and you don't want to go too technical and everything, but I've also at the same time seen how that can be quite dangerous, for instance, and lead to edge catches and injuries. And what I try to explain to new people is like, it is a bit of a process learning at the beginning, but just really try to encourage people that by learning in a certain way, I guess what I would call that the right way, they will develop skills that might be a bit more difficult to start with, but will really like take them through, and improve them as a snowboarder as they go along, and not set them up for failure in the future because they're not bad habits, but they're something that will be able to be applied to like higher end riding. I've also been thinking a lot about like the differences between skiing and snowboarding and that learning progression. And I think it's actually very good for skiing that you have to move past this snowplow, because what it really teaches people is how to turn. And I think that's something that is missing from a lot of snowboarders. And that's a big thing that I try to explain. And by turning, I don't just mean you changing edge or getting the board from heel side to toe side, although you are technically turning. I mean about like actually following like an S shape down the mountain and following the nose of your board and riding its length and engaging the side cut. And because the progression of snowboarding, you start to learn a side slip, a skid. The problem is you can actually get down the whole mountain with that skill. With a snowplow, you can't, well, I know sometimes when you have to slip courses, I've had to do that in the past and snowplow some pretty steep runs. But generally speaking, you can't rely on your snowplow to get down more difficult runs. And people are aware of that. So then they go on to this next level where they do plow parallel. And I think that parallel bit in between those plows is so important because it teaches people to traverse across the slope, which doesn't really sound like much, but that's something so many snowboarders are missing. And they do their beginner lessons or whatever. They learn how to side slip. They learn how to get the board around, but that skid becomes their primary method of control. And that's why that noise has become so synonymous with snowboarders. Whereas skiers, they learn this traverse across the slope. And that traverse across the slope is essential in snowboarding if you want to be able to get an early edge change and, start making turns that, again, how I would sell them, allow you to ride more advanced terrain, powder, bumps, trees, whatever you want to do. You need to learn these skills. But that incentive to do these things isn't really there for snowboarders at the beginning. They just want to learn to kind of ride the mountain, and you can ride groomed slopes quite easily with pretty poor technique on a snowboard. And like, it is fun at the beginning. I think if you've just started learning and then 3 days later, you are like blasting down some runs, but then you get stuck at this point where, okay, these skills I'm doing here, they don't work in any other terrain. They only work on green slopes. As soon as it's slushy, bumpy, anything, it doesn't work. Oh, it's a powder day. This technique doesn't really work here. I think like just trying to educate, and that sounds preachy when I say just educate, but
no, I know.
Really try and get people on board with turning, making these S turns. For me, that's the most important skill you've got to learn, really.
In snowboarding, are there like plateaus that you find like that, or like certain light bulb moments where you see like something click?
Yeah, I
Or
mean, I would say that's definitely the big one, the one I just explained. People call it like the windscreen wipers. They just kick their back
Mm,
foot out and wash the board out like that. And I've had some clients that's so ingrained in their riding, it's really difficult to get them out of it. Whereas if you can, if you don't get someone sort of stuck on that track early on, it's quite difficult. So that it's quite easy, sorry, for them to move past that. So I would say that's one of the biggest plateaus. Like short turns is quite a difficult one for a lot of snowboarders. It's quite easy to do these big, like more carved style, even if they're not perfectly carved, but these bigger turns, just by kind of rocking your weight, rocking your center of mass over the board to be able to manipulate the boards, but still achieve like a smooth, non-skidded line is more difficult. So that's where like the more intricate lower body movements come into it, like steering with your lower body joints, your ankles, your knees, and things like that. So
mm,
that's kind of another plateau. And then you get like psychological plateaus and things like that. People that won't go on steep runs, and not necessarily because of their ability, but they're unable to do certain movements because it's steep or something like that. And that presents its own hurdle you have to work past.
yeah.
But yeah, I would 100% say the main plateau is this skidded style of riding. And if you're on a chairlift and you look out at snowboarders, that is like how 99% of snowboarders. And it's funny, actually, like I put out a video talking about carving or things like that. And I actually get comments from snowboarders being like, "You're an idiot. You're just taking up too much space. Stay on the side." And they're not really aware, I don't think, of what they're promoting, but they're essentially saying, this is how you should ride. And I do also get it in some places, like it could be so busy and you don't have this space to be able to take up, which is unfortunate. And sometimes that kind of turn has its place. But I also just think you're missing out on so much. Like the
Yeah.
sensation of putting a board on its edge is so satisfying. This sounds really boring. And if I heard myself say this 10 years ago when I was all about hitting jumps or trying to ride power or drop cliffs, if I heard
Mm,
someone say just turning on a piece is really satisfying, I think that's really sad. But now that's what I believe. And I get so much satisfaction just from riding the
yeah.
piece.
Yeah.
And it can be so rewarding. And this is a cheesy quote. Someone said that turn is the first thing you learn, the last thing you master.
Yeah. That's great. That is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's so true. That's so true, though. Like I've had some of the. I'm just thinking back then. When you're talking about the plateaus and you're getting people through different things. Like I think the biggest ones I can recall where someone's been like properly elated would be a carved turn for the first time, like completely feeling in control and not skidding everywhere. Because there's that element of when you skid, there's that element of you're going with. You're hoping that the snow's going to be okay enough to carry on skidding on it. Like if you hit something, you're knackered. So that's interesting. Do you find, such a push on this one, but do you find when you said with the psychological thing or with the skidding, is there something you find you keep coming back to, whether it comes from when people are skidding to then carve for the first time, like a drill or something that if someone's listening to this thinking that's
what's
me.
that, sorry, to get away from skidding into
Yes, yeah. So if someone's listening to this now thinking, oh,
Yeah.
you've just described washing the back foot out, that's me all day. Like,
So I mean, one place where I often start, it kind of comes back to this traverse we were talking about, like in the skiing, this parallel across the slope before you make your turn.
Mm.
Because if you think about the turn as the S shape, if you kind of pull that S apart, and like in the middle, you can then connect both of those turns with this line across the slope. And that line, that traverse across the slope, it's the start of every turn, but it's also the end of every turn. So if you can get that right, you're going to set yourself up so much better. And this might sound like stupid, but like all a turn is, all we're doing is changing your momentum from going one way across the mountain to going the other way across the mountain. We're literally just going left and right across the mountain. And we do that, obviously, to slow ourselves down and control our speed. By cutting across the path of gravity, you can control your speed. So if you start someone off in that traverse across the slope, then that sets them up well for that top part of the turn. Think like that 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock on the clock, that kind of
Mm.
arc. If you want to be able to follow that arc, you first need to be going across the slope. And if you're not doing that at the beginning, you can't get that top part of the arc. And the arc of the turn is essential for smoothly redirecting the center of mass from going one way across the slope to going the other way. So yeah, I always start it there. It's a very easy place to break it down because just going slowly across the slope, there's not much forces acting against you. And it usually doesn't take very long at all to get someone who is skidding to be able to do a carved traverse from one side of the piece to the other, leaving a thin line. You don't even need to have great posture or anything like that. All you need to do is balance your way over your edge and lean onto the inside of, lean into the hill, sorry, and you can get that. So yeah, I think that's like a great place to start. And it all just comes to breaking the turn down into different parts. But so many people, I think, when they realize they're not necessarily skiing or snowboarding well, they always like look at the end part where they lose control, where they skid, and think, oh, I must need to be in a stronger position or something like that. But usually the problem started earlier on in the turn. It's something you've done at the top of the turn that's affecting how they feel at the bottom of the turn.
Well, yeah, interesting. Just a couple more questions. We'll almost come to the end now. So the snowboarding industry is constantly evolving. One of the schools here in town actually started as a snowboard school 30 years ago. And then just looking at the kit and that from then to now, it is crazy. But how do you stay updated with whether it's tech or trends or like coaching philosophies? Like, what do you do to stay not relevant, but how do you keep progressing with the sport that's pretty fast
I
moving?
mean, one thing I love now is, and this is something that we didn't have when I started becoming an instructor and when I started snowboarding, is because of things like Instagram and YouTube, you can see so much of, so we're talking about snowboarding now, I can see so much snowboarding from all over the world every day. And when I started, I really had complete faith in the guy who took me for my Basie level 1. I was like, okay, this guy has his profession. I had all my trust in him and everything he said and the way he rode. I was like, okay, this is like the goal that I'm working towards. And I don't mean we should step away from that, but now like people have so many different goals and they're coming to you or they're coming to an instructor, and hopefully they have faith in your abilities and everything, but they might have their own kind of idea of how they want to snowboard. Like you get guys in Japan doing this like crazy, but really high performance carving. A lot of people come to me and they're like, right, I want to do this. Or you've got other guys performing all these ground tricks and this different style of snowboarding, and someone might want to come and do this. I love seeing all these different styles of snowboarding, and I almost think I should try and kind of hone my skills more specifically into one area. But I love trying to almost be a jack of all trades within snowboarding and being able to do everything. I guess for me, I just try to consume as much of the thing I love, which like isn't a chore, and hopefully be as knowledgeable about it all as I can be, and not get stuck in a mindset of this is how I learned 10 years ago, but be willing to evolve and adapt basically and try out new things. And it's really fun trying out new things and learning things as well. And like what I said earlier, when I got my level 2, I thought I knew everything. And now I definitely know more than I knew then, but I still feel like really I don't know anything at all. And that's a good way to approach things. Like really, even though I am a coach, a trainer, I'm still like such a student and I'm still evolving so much. And there's so much more that I want to learn. And I don't think I've peaked at all. And every season I get excited about, learning new things.
So when you do get somebody, if you were to coach someone of the elite, what's a way that you could still help them that you find as a coach?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a bit of that, like coaching like young athletes in freestyle who are doing tricks on the jumps that I can't do. And, you don't have to be able to do, these guys are doing like 1080s and stuff, and I can't do those. But like, I know how to get them to a place and I know what they're supposed to be doing. And that's just from being knowledgeable about it. And often when you're doing stuff like that high end as well, they're not looking for, oh, you need to do this with your arm to get the trick. or whatever, or like a specific bit of advice like that. It's more about just kind of setting the session in a way to nurture their progression and help evolve that. Not on such an advanced level, but like one example would be of someone who wanted to do something incredibly specific. So I mentioned this kind of Japanese style of carving, and one thing that's kind of goes hand in hand with that is how you stand on the snowboard, how you set up your feet, and you have to set them up in this like positive forward facing way to allow your body to get into some of the positions they get into. But because it's become so big on Instagram and YouTube, like these riders doing that, I do now also get a lot of clients who come to me and like I can see straight away that's what their setup is like and that's what they want to do. But at the same time, they haven't developed like the necessary skills to even like hold an edge properly on their snowboard. So again, you get this trying to kind of jump straight to the finish by like changing equipment or something like that. And
Yeah.
they need to kind of really, just learn how to get the basics down first.
It comes back to that skills thing we were talking about before. You take your time with the skills at the start, and it pays off big time. So last question, always end up with the same one. If you could go back to your first day as a coach, what advice would you give yourself? What advice would you give a young Malcolm?
Just tell myself that you don't know anything. You're a fool. No, I mean, just to be really open and just try and take it all in. And like, I wish things, sometimes I hate social media and Instagram and stuff like this. It's just like a machine that's just hungry for content. But I also wish it did exist when I was younger, because there's so many great resources on there. I mean, one thing that I'm so good at is just watching someone and kind of understanding what they're doing. And if I had all these images and videos to watch at that younger age, I think I would have learned so much quicker. And obviously, everyone learns in different ways, but it's just to try and kind of consume as much as what you love, especially at that like younger age when your like brains are so plastic and you can just learn stuff so quickly. And this kind of comes back to this like mad world where you can over obsess about sliding on a plank of wood. But yeah, there is something so satisfying, I think, in that pursuit of perfecting something, like whatever that thing is. It's really rewarding, really dedicating time and becoming good at something. So yeah, I would just sort of tell myself, this is something you love, just dedicate your time to, basically.
That's awesome. Do you ever catch old videos of yourself or something from back then and see that? Do you ever see the change, like the big change?
Yeah, massively.
Yeah.
Like even so, I mean, give people a quick bit of history. So I post videos to YouTube, tutorials to YouTube, and been doing for about 5 years now. And so I've got a lot of videos on there, and I tend not to kind of watch myself once it's been done. But I actually recently back and watched some of my older videos, and not, videos from only a couple of seasons ago, and felt like I've come miles on even from a couple of years ago. And, I thought at that time I was kind of at the top of my game and everything. And in some ways it's good to kind of see that, because that means I'm still evolving and still getting better. And yeah, it's nice to look back at that, even though it's a bit cringy. It definitely helps you realize that you're moving in the right direction.
That's what they say, isn't it? If you don't look back at old videos and cringe, then you're not improving. So that's good. I think it's a good thing. Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks.